Hi, everybody. Welcome to the 8th virtual SSA program presented by CDL. Opened in 2017, the SSA is Singapore's first major 3P partnership space dedicated to advocacy, thought leadership, collaboration on climate action, and issues of sustainability. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we've continued with our advocacy through our virtual and social media platforms. I'm Marilyn from CDL Sustainability Team, and today's session is the first of a series of Youth4Climate Global Conversations. Before the panel begins, it's my pleasure to invite Ms. Esther An, CDL's Chief Sustainability Officer, to say a few words. Over to you now, Esther.
Hello, everyone. Hi. First, welcome to our first Youth4Climate Global Conversation. To the participants who have joined us from over 25 countries, a very, very warm welcome. Well, our world is really facing new and unprecedented challenges that have impacted our lives and livelihood. In fact, scientists have long warned that climate change magnifies risks from infectious diseases, making outbreaks frequent and less predictable and harder to deal with. And the link between health of people and our planet has never been clearer. Both are emergency and that require global solutions in this decade of urgent action towards achieving global goal by 2030. And we believe in the importance of empowering youth to drive change for a more sustainable future for all. And for more than a decade now, CDL has remained committed to actively engaging youth through various initiatives such as the SDG Young Leaders Award and the Generation Challenge, which has sent youth leaders to climate challenge places such as the Arctic and Antarctica. And we believe that greater awareness will lead to greater action. We are very glad to reach out to young champions beyond our shores through this global conversation series. And our partner and moderator for the series is Cheryl Lee, and our Singapore's very own climate leader who is passionate and committed to climate action. And I have known Cheryl for some years now. And last year, we were very happy that we connected at COP25 at Madrid again. And that was where the idea of this global outreach initiative was mooted. And we are very happy that the idea has become realized today. And before I close, I would like to thank our panelists for the first conversation today. Your vision, passion, and your amazing stories will certainly inspire more young people to join the action for positive change in the new normal. And I look forward to an exciting conversation with everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther. And before we begin, please ensure that your microphone is muted. And please do take part in the discussion by sharing your comments or questions using the chat box function at the bottom of your screen. This session will last about an hour and will be recorded and accessible on our CDL Sustainability YouTube page. Over to you now, Cheryl.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us here today. A warm welcome to our Youth4Climate Conversation panel. And thank you, CDL, for your warm introductions and for having us. So I'm Cheryl. I'll be moderating for today's panel. So I will be asking and taking questions from you all, from the audience, to our panelists as well. So don't hesitate to drop a message into the comment box. So before we start the conversation with our panelists, let's actually play a little game with everyone here. So I actually have a little question to ask everyone. So the question is, what is the biggest threat or challenge towards world development? Is it 1, climate change, 2, melting polar ice caps, 3, pollution, or 4, population growth? Drop your answers into the comment box and we will reveal the answers later. But meanwhile, without further ado, let's start our conversations. So to kick off our conversation today, let's invite Xiang Tian, who's the founder of Lepak in SG, to share his experience in taking climate action in Singapore. So Xiang Tian, the floor is yours.
Okay. Hello. So my name is Xiang Tian. I'm currently an undergraduate studying about railway engineering in Singapore. And I run an informal environmental group called Lepak in SG. So Lepak in SG, it literally means to chill out in Singapore. Yeah. So we started out as a calendar of events for environmental stuff in Singapore. But after 2 days of running this calendar, we realized that it's a lot of boring admin work. So like imagine adding events to a Google Calendar all day long. Like, it's really boring. So we figured we needed to do some fun things. So we started organizing some random events based on whatever we felt like doing that month. So I think there was one month we thought like it would be cool to have a nature walk where we play Pokemon Go. So you can actually see like, the plants and animals that inspire the Pokemon that you see in the game. Yeah, so for some time we were doing random events like that. But after a year or so, we realized that even though these things are very fun, we still need to have, it's fun but not very meaningful, and we don't have like long-term impact. So we thought that maybe we should come up with some longer-term projects that will be more meaningful but still enjoyable. And then along the way, we kind of figured that we need to be calling for systemic change rather than individual action. So instead of things like getting people to, not use a plastic straw or bring their own containers, we thought we need to get people to rethink about the systems in our lives that are shaping our behaviors, and looking at where like majority of the emissions and waste and destruction of natural spaces are actually coming from. Yeah. So some of the things that we tried to do in the past include reading some government publications and giving feedback to relevant agencies to tell them that, hey, maybe like this thing isn't too good, or we like this thing that you're doing. We've also been doing some public consultations with the government. And also, because in Singapore, they like to do online consultations. So one thing we have also tried to do is to come up with suggestions for these online consultations and get people to submit their responses based on our suggestions to the online consultation. But I think like what we're trying to do, we are still trying to figure out like what works in Singapore when trying to create systemic change. So we're just trying a lot of different things. So other things that we've also tried is to come together with other groups to send a message to certain groups. So for example, in 2018, we co-signed this open letter to Singapore's banks to get them to stop financing coal. So they didn't completely agree to it last year, but I think like last year they had a good step forward. And also I think this year, because of the whole COVID-19 crisis, there was actually an emerging stronger task force in Singapore where they wanted to chart how the economy could recover post-COVID-19. And one problem with that task force was that there was very little diversity. So like I think there were 15 members and only 2 were female. So we co-signed an open letter that called for greater diversity in the task force. And also because in the task force, there was a chairman and managing director of ExxonMobil Asia Pacific. So we thought like, if we are looking at recovery from COVID-19, should we really be looking at fossil fuels, or should we have more diverse people in this task force to call for a greener transition? Yeah, so short intro.
Thank you for sharing, Tian. So you mentioned something about systemic change, right? So you've been you've actually been in this environmental community in Singapore for quite some years. Is there any changes, right, you've seen over this period? And like what has this changes been posed as a challenge to you?
So I think, actually I haven't been doing this for like super long. I've just been doing this for about 5 years. Like there are people who have been doing it for like 20 years or more, right? So yeah, really. I think in Singapore, like over the past 5 years, there have been quite a few like positive changes. So like how many of the groups are actually advocating for systemic change rather than individual change. So I think if you look at last year, we had a SG Climate Rally, which was the first time that we had an offline large-scale protest like that in Singapore. And also I think like social media has definitely taken awareness and action to another level. So again, last year there was this online climate strike where basically the 2 organizers got people to post like photos and stuff on Instagram and Facebook with a government climate action hashtag. So like for a while they took over the government hashtag, which was quite cool lah. So if you scroll through like the Facebook or Instagram hashtag, you will see like a lot of government posts as well as like individuals posting about, oh, I didn't use a straw today, then like hashtag climate action SG. And suddenly you see like a wave of protest images, like how we need more systemic change and things like that, which was really quite cool to see lah. So I think like we also start to see a lot of younger people step up to want to do more for the environment as advocates or activists. So that's really good. So like I think when I first started out 5 years ago, right, I was pretty much like the youngest person in every single room lah. But now I'm not. Okay, maybe it's just a function of time, but you know, it's good to see like more younger people lah. Okay, but I still haven't asked the challenges part. Like,
sorry? Yeah, I still haven't asked the challenges, but but is there any challenges?
Actually, yeah. I think there are several challenges. One is that there's limited willingness from the government to regulate what companies in Singapore do, or especially like what they do overseas lah. And also like there's limited willingness to limit our emissions from our fossil fuel industry. So I think like for environmentalists in Singapore, there's definitely more we can do to push government to regulate what businesses here do, and also to target the companies themselves lah. Because I think if you look at it, over the past few years, there haven't been a lot of focus on companies that behave irresponsibly. Okay, so don't worry, CDL, it's not you. But you can see like there's fossil fuel companies, right, like Shell, ExxonMobil. They are based in Singapore, and there are also some like, I think it's like what I would call like, you know, shady firms in Singapore. They are based here. I think like recently there was a Singapore firm that is financing a 1,000 megawatt coal plant in Laos. So I mean, it totally doesn't make sense to me that, you know, on one hand, we are talking about how Singapore is doing our part as a responsible member of the world, right, to mitigate climate change. But at the same time, we're not regulating companies that do things like that in other countries. Yeah, and yeah, I think another part is that a lot of people are kind of stuck in this mindset that, you know, as long as we all change our lifestyles and habits, we can limit global temperature rise to about 1.5 degrees, and can stop the destruction of natural habitats, can stop filling up our landfills and all the other environmental issues that we see. I mean, like this train of thought usually goes on to the solution that, okay, we just need to educate everyone and educate them until they all change their lifestyles, and then, you know, we'll solve this climate thing.
It's a rounded issue.
But yeah, so I mean, personally, I don't think educating people and waiting for them to, you know, voluntarily change their behavior without changing the systems that force their behaviors to be environmentally unfriendly is enough lah. So I believe that
more needs to be done.
Yeah, more needs to be done.
As a whole, as a system.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you for sharing, Tian. I think coming back closer to home, right? When you first founded Lepak in SG, right? You mentioned you actually saw the need to centralize information, you know, and you know, was that challenging when you first started? And you know, is it the same now?
Okay, so when we first started, it was really just us and a bunch of friends that I have on Facebook who are sharing events. I mean, like, so I mean, I meet the people who organize events in real life, right? Then you make friends with them on Facebook. Then like when they share their event on Facebook, then okay, I add it to the calendar. So that was how we have been running it for the past 5 years. And it's quite challenging because people don't actually want to add their events to the calendar, because it's an extra step, right, on top of whatever publicity you have to do. And there's no way we can say like, okay, you add your event to the calendar, we can guarantee like 50 more people come to your event. So that part is a challenge, which we tried to solve by some like automation. Like now you can add your own event to our calendar through like a Google form, and it automatically appears onto our calendar. Yeah, but we don't actually have that many people filling out the form. So it's still a lot of like, you know, admin work, which is very boring. Like I said.
So audiences out there, if you guys are hosting your environmental events, please fill up on the Lepak in SG calendar as well, yeah?
Yep.
Okay, thank you for sharing, Xiang Tian. Before we move on to the next speaker, let's review our answer for our very first pop quiz question. Rina, could you thank you for flashing the question. So what is the biggest threat, challenge towards development? So I'm looking at the group chat now, yeah? All of you have like dropped your answers. Okay, so majority says 1, 4, 3. Interesting, nobody said 2. Okay, the answer is actually 1. It's actually climate change. Although all of the points actually pose as a challenge towards world development, climate change presents the single biggest threat to development. Because of its widespread and unprecedented impacts, it disproportionately burden on the poorest and most vulnerable community. So thank you everyone for participating in this little quiz. So next up, we actually have Sarah. So Sarah is an amazing environmental champion who took her passion onto her professional career. So Sarah, the floor is yours.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Can we see you?
Okay, 1 second.
Hi, we can see you.
So thank you for having me here. My name is Sarah. I come from Texas in the United States. I work in 2 different parts to work on the climate crisis. First, I'm the hub coordinator for the Sunrise Movement in Houston, Texas. And that is a youth activist movement working to stop climate change and create millions of good jobs in the process. And then second, I also work in renewable energy, where I work with rural communities in Indiana and Ohio to develop large-scale wind and solar energy farms. So for my activism in the Houston Sunrise Movement, we're part of a bigger movement just called the Sunrise Movement in the United States. We have hubs all over in different cities or really any area in the US. And what we're trying to do is to stop climate change, create millions of good jobs in the process. And how our hub has tried to do that is first try to get fossil fuel money out of politics. Houston is the oil and gas capital of the world, and we have a lot of fossil fuel companies that give a lot of money to our politicians. It becomes really, really difficult for them to take any climate change policy seriously when they're getting a lot of money from oil and gas. So we work really hard before the primaries, which is the step before elections here, to ask all of the candidates to sign what's called the fossil-free money pledge, and it says that they won't knowingly accept more than $500 from any fossil fuel company or executive. So it gets into kind of blurry territory there, but usually you figure it out because of our campaign financing laws here, if somebody is accepting large amounts of money from the fossil fuel industry. And then second, and kind of the thing that we've focused really heavily on, is the Green New Deal. So if any of you guys haven't heard what the Green New Deal is, it's a resolution here aimed at tackling the climate crisis through an economic stimulus package. And it kind of comes into, it's kind of trying to tackle 2 different problems. So the first is obviously the climate crisis, but the second one is poverty. So if we're trying to get rid of the idea that you can't have good environmental climate policy without having to make these sacrifices. So essentially it's a federal jobs guarantee that says we're going to give everybody a job if they want to. We're going to pay specific attention to fossil fuel workers who are transitioning out of that industry. And while we do that, we're going to fix our crumbling infrastructure. We don't have trains here. We do, but not like in Europe or other places. We are gonna make sure that everybody is basically just taken care of while we meet these really big goals like all renewables, or zero net carbon emissions by 2050, and other goals like that. So in order to do that, we organize around gaining people power and gaining political power. So we are endorsing certain candidates to get into office. So this week, we've been pushing, there was the Kentucky candidate, Kentucky primary and New York primary. We won the candidate that we backed in New York, and we're getting the results today on the candidate in Kentucky. In addition to those like national races that we participate in through call-ins, we also endorse people locally. So we just try to figure out the political scene, and if somebody seems like they're going to be supporting the Green New Deal and they're going to be an ally to us, young people who care about the climate crisis, then we're going to help them out. We're going to get people canvassing. We're going to see what we can do for their fundraising, which obviously that's not really where our energy is, but you know, having people who can make calls really makes a difference. And then, the other way is through our climate strikes. So we plan like every quarter, basically a big climate strike, which has changed now because of COVID. But being able to make disruptions in small or big ways is a really like integral part of what we do in trying to make systemic change. Again, like rather than
community.
Asking 6 jobs or something like that.
Cool. Thank you for sharing, Sarah. So I actually have a very big question for you, because I've known you as an advocate for environmental issues and like doing amazing work within your community with regards to climate change. And seeing you like going into the renewable energy sector, you know, I'm very curious, how has your personal work inspired your career goals?
Yeah, I think I am only in the renewable energy industry because I want to meet these big goals by mostly renewable energy by 2030 and fully by 2050. I had an opportunity to work in government affairs in renewable energy, which is, you know, I have a passion for policy, and I think all of that is really interesting, but I actually pivoted away from that to work in development, which is the job that like directly is working with communities to build new projects, because I just think it's critical that we're building as much as possible while we make sure that the communities are not like totally screwed over. I don't know how else to say that, but some companies really do kind of not care about the communities. So that's where I saw myself. And I definitely have been thinking, you know, like, is this even the place for me? If there are other people who want to do this, there's bigger challenges out there. But yeah, I think that like the renewable energy industry is a great one and they're doing great things, but I'm only there. I'm not there necessarily because it's a job. I'm there because I think we like are really far behind in our renewable energy goals in the US.
And I have a question to ask you is like, has working in the renewable energy sector, you know, sort of changed your perspective on your personal cause in you know, taking climate action, and how?
That's interesting. I work in, I develop projects in Ohio and Indiana, which is what we call the Corn Belt in the United States. And that's kind of where the home of Trump country is. So it's been interesting for me to like sit in the living rooms of people who politically could not be more different than me and chat and just kind of like see a very, very different way of life. Like corn farmers, I'm from a city, like it's just so different. And so kind of to be able to come back to Sunrise and say, like, this is not on anybody as an individual, this is our system. And like, there are good people who believe in things that I believe are bad. And to humanize kind of what we hope, not what we call the enemy, but you know what I mean? Like humanize people who are against climate policy, and be able to take that and like bring that into my own activism and see the humanity in everybody has really helped.
That's really inspiring to actually, you know, hear from different perspectives of the spectrum. You know, sometimes it's so easy that we are, working hard on our goals for the environment, that sometimes, you know, it's also nice to hear from, you know, people who are not necessarily involved in the climate scene, but also to hear their worries and their view and to integrate them into, you know, our work, right?
Yeah, and it's like we might not use the same language, but essentially we're getting to the same thing. These corn farmers are controlled by the system that is a monocropping in the middle west of the US, and it causes a lot of pollution. It's causing a lot of water pollution. It's ruining the land, and all of these like different things that I'm trying to work on in a different way. I think they see the value of that, but they're never going to use the same language that I use. So I just learning that and hearing person in person. Everybody out there is getting cancer. I don't know if you guys have heard about Monsanto and these different chemicals that we use on crops, but it's like I think like our reasons for not liking the way Monsanto has created the monocrop industry is also impacting them in a negative way.
Actually, I'm very curious, what has inspired you to take action? Because you shared a lot about, you saw that, like taking climate action is really important, because time is running out. But like, what has inspired you in the very first place to begin with?
Well, I think I came at it from a conservation perspective. I went into college knowing I wanted to do environmental policy just because I love the ocean, just like a typical, I don't know, boring story. But I went to school in St. Louis.
It's not.
Okay. I went to school in St. Louis where there was a illegally dumped radioactive waste in a community that was poor people of color, and I learned about environmental justice, and then I learned about the whole system, and it really just changed like the way that this is not just like cleaning the ocean and coral reefs. It's so much more, and that comes from my own privilege, but learning the bigger story of it is what really drives me now.
Thank you for sharing, Sarah. Okay, so everyone in the audience, this is a small exercise that we have, before we move on to our next panel speaker, let's do a few stretches together, okay? So like what I want you guys to do, right, is, first turn on your camera. Can we like start having people turning on their camera? Guys from the team, can you all help me see if people are turning on their camera? Are people turning on their camera? Can we see them? Yay! People are turning on your camera. I can see you guys. Yay! Woo! Okay, awesome. Okay, so I can see you guys, and you guys can see me, right? Okay, awesome. Okay, so for this segment, right, we're gonna do some exercises together. Okay, so oh, you don't have a camera. It's okay, but just join us. I trust that even without a camera seeing you, you are following our exercises, okay? So first thing that we're gonna do is you're gonna swing your arms up to the sky. You're gonna do this. Everybody arms up to the sky. And then you reach for your left. Where's my left? This side, sorry. Reach to your left and then now reach to your right. And now you flash your biggest smile. Whee! Okay, amazing. So thank you everyone. Thank you guys for doing so much for doing this exercise with us. So I've noticed like we all have been, recently due to the COVID-19 crisis, and also we have been, Zooming and been relying on our screen these days, right? It's actually very important that we integrate like little exercises like this to keep ourselves, healthy and fresh. So I hope like, that small exercise have like rejuvenated everyone. Okay, so now back to our panel. I would like to introduce a good friend of mine, Chiagozie, to share his amazing experience with like positive change for the planet. Chiagozie, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Shirley. Thanks a lot for inviting me and for having me. And it's been inspiring listening to my colleagues and friends also on here on their stories on how they started their environment activism. I mean, for me, it was way back while I was in the high school. We call it secondary school here in Nigeria. I was really always passionate about the environment. I think probably it runs in the family, but not in a very formalized way. Yeah, but then during the high school, I was almost nicknamed global warming, because then it was global warming that everybody was talking about, and we didn't even know that much about it. But I always talked about it in my classes, at debates, at the assembly grounds for the school sessions. And then I was campaigning massively against bush burning, because that was an issue that we had then in my environment, in the state where I was going for my high school. We had a lot of bush burning, and sometimes it gets into the houses. It was massive pollution for everyone. It was choking people. So that was the campaign I focused on, added to, of course, a lot of plastic waste and pollution. So this was what I did a lot of the times without fully understanding the issue, I must say. But I knew that this is something that comes to me naturally. I could easily, connect to it. And at some stage where it really came to me that I can do more was when I wrote the first article I ever published, that I got published, in a formal magazine. That was in my school magazine then. Back in those days, people just write articles about, riddles and jokes, or things about, themselves, just normal things. But for me, it was different. I had to write about global warming, and my teachers, my editors thought it was quite interesting that I could have such an interest, and they published the article without editing it. And that gave me a lot of confidence. I mean, it was really small, if I look back at it now, I think, it was really insignificant, but it meant a lot to me that once that article was published with such confidence on me, for the whole session, for the whole school and state to be able to read it, I felt like, if this could happen, then I can do even way more. So that kick-started, my other activities within the environment. And then I got into the university. I started volunteering for Tunza Eco Generation. Probably, some of you probably know about Tunza Eco Generation. Is a program of Samsung Engineering and United Nations Environment, where they raise a lot of climate ambassadors across countries and continents. So I was the ambassador to Nigeria. And at some point, of course, I went up to the ambassador for Africa. So with Eco Generation, I scaled up the activism. I was making reports at least twice monthly on different environmental issues happening in Nigeria, and reporting back to the headquarters, of course, in South Korea then, and working a lot on deforestation issues in my country, on species that were going into extinction, on flooding, on some climate adaptation issues around. And I won a couple of awards, like monthly awards that we have then within the Eco Generation mechanism. And it was really inspiring to be in such a global network with a lot of people writing amazing things about their countries. It really inspired me a lot, because we could share ideas. I could see what was working in a country and implement in my own country within my own immediate environment. It was quite tough, to manage all this with also studies, but it was really, really inspiring. And then from Eco Generation, I met my current organization now, which is Plan for the Planet. And I got invited for the Youth Summit based on my actions and probably some of the awards I won with Eco Generation. So I got invited for the first Youth Summit I ever went for. That was in Munich in 2015. And then it was massive. It was a lot of information for me. I learned negotiation skills. I learned a lot of things that in the next 6 months, I felt like a really good expert, on climate change. So it was really, really important for me to do that and then grow from there. And then there, I also discovered, it was then that I discovered the youth constituency called Yongo, which is the youth constituency to UN Environment, UNFCCC, UN Climate Change. And then from there, I engaged, in a lot of the activities, global climate activism, in different working groups, and then gradually started a working group we called the Renewable Energy Working Group, because I have a lot of interest in renewable energy, to scale it up within Africa and also within my country, especially energy democracy, to make sure that people are able to have their electricity from natural sources. They have control over them on how they use it, and they can even sell them to the government if they produce more than they can use. And I did that, work within Yongo for some time in this working group, and then of course became focal point for Yongo last year.
Interesting.
And then up to this point, working also nationally in my country, where we are campaigning to end gas flaring in Nigeria. We've built a national coalition of labor and civil society members who are working to end gas flaring in the country this year.
Thank you for sharing, Chiagozie. It seems like you have came such a long way to, where you are right now. So I actually have a question, what are the personal challenges, you had to overcome, since, you know, you have started this journey, you know, from quite some time to now, you know, back then, you know, taking climate action wasn't, you know, still as common as today. You know, what are the personal challenges you had to overcome?
Yeah, definitely. The first thing was that people were not aware. I mean, there was a lack of information, lack of awareness. So you had to break that barrier to inform people. So every day you are discussing new things with people, you were explaining to friends, because there was kind of mockery, you know, because people don't understand. They feel like you're wasting your time, or you must be really stupid, you know, to be engaging in this. So it was a challenge for me to convince people. I was not really bent on convincing, but I just wanted to explain so people can understand, because once we multiply the action, that's when we start, you know, achieving our aims. So that was really challenging for me. The other big challenge I had was combining this with my university education. When I travel and I meet my friends who come for, you know, the same conferences or capacity building sessions that I come for, I hear their universities give them like credits for attending, maybe 0.5 or 1 credit unit. But for me, I get punished, you know, for coming for this. I probably will have to fail my test or exam, you know, to be able to. So it was really a challenge for me, but I really damned it. Like I knew, like, this is my passion. I preferred this to whatever studies I was going to have. I mean, my studies did not necessarily resonate with me that much, because I think this is what I really want to do. So I gave it priority. I tried to manage both so I could graduate out, of course, but yeah, I gave it my priority. So my school environment didn't really allow me to do as much as I really wanted to do then. It was really tough for me. And then, of course, some lack of knowledge in some topics early on. I would have done with a lot of knowledge, but of course you don't get it all at once. But yeah, gradually I got even more knowledge that could have been helpful even in the earlier days.
I see. But what has inspired you, you know, to be on this environmental, you know, journey?
Yes, if you look around and you see the continent I come from and the country I come from, we, as a continent in Africa, we generate 4% of global climate emission, but we suffer the effects most. Here, where we are facing daily issues of environmental, or what I would call climate migrants, because it's happening. We're facing issues of, you know, climate insecurity, climate-induced insecurity, because farmers are migrating from areas where desert is, you know, to areas that still have green fields. So I'm seeing this daily, and even from the way back, how people are deforesting, you know, hunting in very, very reckless ways. You know, it was a whole squad of challenge. But for me, it was because people were not concerned, they were not taking action, that I felt I could do something about this. I felt really challenged. I read a lot of newspaper articles. I watched the TV a lot. So I got a lot of information that really propelled me to take action, to be someone that would protect the environment in my area. Because initially I started out, you know, thinking about the environment, not necessarily focused on the climate change, but then it became, you know, a big topic. And then with more understanding, I saw, oh, this is actually the bigger scale of it. But for me, primarily, just about doing something in my immediate community, which was really, really affected at that time.
Understand. Thank you for sharing, Chiagozie. So next up, okay, I'm not gonna, you know, surprise you guys with a question on an activity, but we're gonna go to our next speaker. So our next speaker, we have is a very good friend of ours. So we have Marie-Claire to share with us her incredible journey in taking climate actions. So Marie-Claire, the floor is yours.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for the invitation, and also thanks for the incredible speeches before. I'm very honored to be here and share my personal story with the aim to hopefully inspire other young people to take on this journey despite some challenges. They are on the way, but I can promise you that it's a wonderful journey and a very meaningful and fulfilling journey. So I started to be worried about the climate when I was around 8 years old. In Switzerland, we have a lot of mountains, the Alps, and we are often going hiking in the mountains. And then I could really see how the glaciers were going back, because there are some like information boxes where it's written like what the dimension was of the glacier. And then the closer we came to the glacier, actually we had to walk even further. And so my parents told me about this thing about the global warming, climate change, and about the cars and everything, what is polluting. I didn't really get it, but it was like something which kind of horrified me. And I really want to do something. So I read more about it in school and later on. Also, I studied in this direction, or still studying in this direction, to understand and learn more. And then first I got very frustrated because I could read a lot of very horrifying things. Also seeing it in books, on TV, in the newspaper. And then I don't actually know like from whom, but I was writing something about, yeah, if you're not taking action, then yeah, you're part of the problem. So I didn't want to be part of a problem. So I started to be active when I was around 13. First in my very local community. I come from a rural area of Switzerland, and then started to be engaged there in local community projects. And then when I moved to Zurich, which is the biggest city of Switzerland for my studies, I started to be active also on a national and later on international level. So my first, I would say, bigger, impactful engagement was with the Sustainability Week. I will also share some slides in a minute to give you some background information. But basically, it's a week to inspire action on the campus, on the university, to transform the university like itself to be more sustainable, and with this inspire society again to be more sustainable. And what I did, I was scaling this up on the national level after I have been invited by the Swiss Radio and Television for a daily interview. This is basically the most heard interview in Switzerland. And then it spread like a wildfire over Switzerland. And then we had sustainability weeks all over the country. And then 2 years later, with the president of Switzerland, I was able to spread it internationally. Unfortunately, COVID now, it makes it a little bit challenging. Nevertheless, we adopted and made it online. And along this, I was also, I mean, as mentioned in the beginning, I was very concerned about the climate. So I joined the National Organization for Young People and Climate, and then went back in 2018 to the International Climate Conference. This is also where I got to know Udeh. And joined Yango, the international space for young people, and when we were at the climate negotiations. And I was first very overwhelmed, again, very frustrated, because I could just not understand what was going on, which made me very frustrated, because basically I was preparing a lot, and I really thought that I'm going to make an impact there. And I was there, and I was just running around being hungry and didn't get anything. But I stayed engaged. I started with some working groups, trying to be meaningful, and was very lucky that last year I was appointed by the president of Switzerland to be the youngest member of the Swiss delegation, and also the youngest negotiator. And I was very fortunate I could lobby, that I could actually negotiate on the topics I'm very passionate about, so education, raising awareness, but also gender issues. The whole gender action plan part of the negotiations, as well as technology transfer. So I was very happy that I could contribute, and I would have been a negotiator this year as well, but all conferences are postponed. So this is like how I started, what I've been doing, and I'm just like sharing quickly a short slide that about the Sustainability Week, because I think it's always good if one can see it. Okay, so now you should be able to see it, because I think this could also be interesting maybe to some of you. So the goal or the vision of the Sustainability Week is to empower students that they themselves can bring sustainability in all the different aspects, like education, research, but also campus, strategy, governance, into these higher education institutions or education institutions around the world. Because we really believe that students can bring along the change, not alone, but they are a very important driver. So our aspiration is that the students themselves are
For sharing, Marie-Claire. So I have a few questions for you. So you were the youngest delegate on the Swiss delegation at COP. So what is the biggest challenge you face, in your work, and how did you overcome it?
Yeah, so being the youngest delegate ever in Switzerland, and also like one of the youngest at the international conference, obviously brings along that a lot of experts are there, and they often thought that, oh, I know it better than you, so they were not listening in the beginning. So I had to kind of prove myself, which was quite exhausting in the beginning, like repeating things all over again. I'm like, I have already been saying this, but basically how I did it, and actually it worked very well. I was very competent. I prepared myself very, very well, and with this you can also impress. And I was very glad actually that at the end our head of delegation was saying, yeah, we want to have you next year again in the delegation because you have been prepared so well, you have been contributing a lot. So I think it's all about, yeah, being prepared, but also establishing kind of your network in the new position. So having some other delegations, having people who are negotiating in the same field. So whenever you're maybe unsure about something, you can just write them a short message and they can help you so you don't feel alone. So really being good prepared and setting up a network of friends in the system.
Cool. So apart from that, as the co-founder of, the Sustainability Week and having movement being adapted into several parts of the world, right? What is the greatest challenge, you have faced, and how did you overcome it from there?
Yeah, so there are very practical challenges. For example, how to transfer money, how can you make sure that the money is arriving at the right place, how can you set up like international contracts and so on. So I mean, there are like these very practical ones. On the other hand, sometimes I think it's overwhelming because I have a very big vision and I'm really passionate and motivated about this vision, and it works very good, and we could inspire already a lot of people. But sometimes I think that some people are kind of overwhelmed sometimes by the imagination of having this whole transformation. And that we need to do so many things at the same time, right? And we need to do everything right now because otherwise it's too late, and the problems and catastrophes and the crisis is so big, so this can overwhelm. And that's also why I think we need big visions and we need big actions, but also we have to break it down and guide people and support them, and really important, empower people, because what I have seen unfortunately very often that a lot of young people are not empowered to really go forward and stand up and speak for themselves. But when they understand that they can and that it can be successful and it can be very fulfilling, they are so passionate about this. But first we need to do like this step of like an inner transformation that they are able to then transform, for example, the institutions or society on a wider scale.
Thank you for sharing, Marie-Claire. Thank you all panelists for sharing such insightful, amazing experiences, and like inspiring the audiences with your stories. So now it's time for the audience Q&A. So we actually have a few questions already. I think at the very beginning, we have a question by M Ganza. If I am not, we have a question from Musa. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. But I think the question was, how do you, work with limited resources that you have? So I'll open this to, anyone in our audience, in our panel to actually answer this question. And meanwhile, audiences, you guys can, start asking questions. And now is the time to, get our panelists to, answer your different queries. So panelists, how do you work with limited resources? Anyone like to go first? Maybe Chiagozie?
Okay. Yeah, it's fine. So just, there are a lot of ways that you can do, but just like Marie-Claire said, it's very important that you build networks. With networks, you can do a lot of things with limited budgets. You can have friends help out with things pro bono. You can have a lot of things really sorted out. So build network of very relevant and important people in your space. It's also very important that you have a niche area that you can build that network around, so you can easily be identified with this. So whether you have a small budget or not, with your network, you can always get things done. In fact, more often than not, within our space, we've always pulled things off with little or very minimal budgets. And you have to always be innovative in seeking ideas or opinion of people who are probably more experienced in the space to say, how can we have this, but how can we make it work for this should ideally work for 3 people, but how can we make it work for 5, 6 people? And it will always figure a way to do it. You can also do some strategic partnership instead of requesting for funds directly, maybe from partners or something like that. You can request maybe if you need people to be transported somewhere, you can request that the government provides like the bus to take them there. Rather than requesting for the money, you can request that they maybe if they need to fly, to provide a flight company that provides the tickets instead of them giving you money to buy the ticket. So it could be also strategic in that way, that you can have things supplied rather than you getting money for them.
Thank you for sharing, Chiagozie. Anyone else from the panel?
Sarah.
Sarah.
Yeah, I agree. Your network is extremely important. The other thing I want to add, though, is that one of the strengths that we have as youth activists is our energy and our passion, and not to underestimate how much power that gives us. We might not have money and resources right now, but if you can get thousands of people together demanding something, eventually you will get the attention of other groups where they'll start to fund you, and they'll realize that these people are not going to stop. And I'm personally just inspired because, just as youth activists, we don't have many resources, and we're just seeing all over the US right now in these political races, us going and knocking on doors and calling people for political races is becoming so much more effective and powerful than people who have so much money on these campaigns. So just don't underestimate your own energy and power and ability to bring people together.
Thank you, Sarah. Anyone else from the panel like to add on this?
Yeah, quickly. I completely agree with what has been shared by Sarah and Udeh. And also, don't be shy to ask. Very often, including myself in the beginning, I didn't express my wishes, and I was like, try to find a way around. But go there and say, this is my problem, and I need this. Do you have it, or do you have someone who can help me? And actually, very often, if we ask the right questions, a lot of things are possible. Unimaginable things are possible, actually. So ask, and also share what you're doing, because if you're not sharing what you're doing, how can people know what you're doing? How can they know best how to support you? This is also when I shared, actually, when I started sharing what I'm doing on social media. Before, I was not using social media at all, and it's just amazing how much support I'm getting from unexpected sources. So really encourage everyone to share and ask.
Yeah, to share your different resources and the events that you're doing as well. Xiang, is there anything you'd like to add on to this?
Okay, I have to say that for Lepak Energy, we actually don't use any funding at all. So like the past 5 years, we've been running purely on volunteers and pro bono stuff. So like what Chiagozie was saying about your networks, it's true that without networks, we couldn't get like space for events, as well as like little things like people print stuff for us, so we don't have to spend any money. But I'm not sure if we are missing the question here actually. So from what I understand from the question, I actually thought it was more about how like as a country, it's hard to combat climate change and support the environment.
Because we're linking actually two people's question together first, and then sorry, go ahead with that.
Oh, I was just gonna say I actually have no idea how to do that, because it's just completely out of my area of expertise and what I do, right? Yeah.
But actually, here's actually a fun fact. Xiang mentioned like he, haven't put in actual money into his campaign, right? But you can actually see his organization logo in a lot of the bus stops in our country. Yeah, that's how powerful collaboration is. So okay, another question that we have here. Sorry if I missed any of your questions. I'm just like trying to scroll through the group chat to actually get your questions right. We have one very recent one. As a schooling youth, what are some of the actions we can take to make a difference in our community? Sorry?
Yeah, so I think it's very important as a youth, or actually as anyone, to kind of like understand your local context before you try to do anything. So because if you don't understand your local context, and I mean, you can get inspired by what people in different countries are doing, but if you don't understand your local context, you won't actually know whether that thing can work in your country lah. So for example, I think like we've seen Greta Thunberg, right?
Yeah.
Everywhere. Everywhere people are getting inspired by her. But in Singapore, there's no such thing. So why? Because I mean, if you skip school first, like the grades are super important here, right? So most students won't be willing to skip school for climate, to advocate for climate action. And also, it's illegal to protest outside of a certain park without applying to protest in the first place, right? So that kind of like limits your options in that sense. Yeah, so I think that if we don't understand our local context, it's very hard for us to create effective change. Yeah.
Any other of the panel like to add on to that? What are some of the actions we can take to make a difference in our community?
Maybe to add, so sometimes it's very scary to start something new and it's big and it's overwhelming, but fortunately there are very already initiatives going on, right? So you can first, as I also have been doing, and I think many have been doing, maybe join a group or join a team, because if you're in a team, it's always much easier, of course. Because there's already something going on, the connections are there, and then you can maybe grow out of this experience something by your own, or you can maybe drive it in another direction. So you don't always have to start something crazy completely by your own, but you can also join something and then grow with the tasks and grow with the movement.
Thank you. Any other panelists like to add a note to that before I reach to the next?
Yeah, just to add also, as a schooling youth, as I see the question addressed, I mean, it's your immediate community would be like your university or your secondary school or whatever it is. And it will be very important that you understand your local context, as said, and that you're able to, be in an organization already existing, or because it's not always the best thing to start a new one if there's an already existing one that is also solving the problem. So you can join one and take action. What would be most appropriate is probably what Marie-Claire is doing with the Swiss the Sustainability Week International, to make sure that your university is complying to climate measures. So it could be the university buses, electric shuttles, it could be renewable energy components, it could be less paper, it could be just anything, but just make sure that your immediate environment is climate smart in their approaches. That could be really helpful. And of course, we don't underestimate the power of volunteerism. It will be good that you join an organization, you start volunteering to see what is happening there, build your network from there, and then you take it up from there.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Sarah, would you like to add on anything to this question?
Not really. I think they answered it brilliantly.
Thank you. Actually, I have another question for our panel speakers. So this is a question by Jesslyn. So she said, Chiagozie mentioned that it was difficult to convince friends and explain to people with regards to, the climate causes and pushes. Would you be able to share any tips that you might have used to do that successfully? I open this to all our panel speakers.
So it's very important that you actually know stuff, like you know what you are arguing about and what you're talking about. So you need to build your capacity to be able to convince people to see that this works. You need to be very ready for all debates that can come up, from people that want to dissuade you. So you need to be very, very prepared. You need to be fortified with knowledge. And for me also, I worked in the radio at some point as a broadcaster. So I had to read a lot of information, both from newspapers, radio, TV. I really didn't have problem with gathering knowledge. So I had to convince people that this was possible, but even with convincing them, they still doubted. But then the practical actions were very, very powerful to convince them. And when I started partnering with the government, probably showing up on TV interviews and radio interviews, the message was even more clear and more compelling for them, that more people started coming through. So it's very important that you're very knowledgeable about what you're talking about, and you can give clear convincing statements on how it works, where it has worked, and how you're making it work for your local community. You don't need to import things that are abstract, but consider your local context to be able to say, we have this problem of flooding, and this is how we can do it. If we don't put, if we don't litter the drainage with plastic wastes, we will not have these floods flowing into our houses. Things as practical as that could be really helpful.
Maybe something very quickly to add. So yes, you have to be very knowledgeable, but also if you don't know something, you can just say, I don't know. It's okay if you don't know everything. You can start something with not knowing all the details. There are other people, and then you can say, oh, I don't know, but I'm going to ask someone who knows, and then you can ask in the network. So don't shy away of not knowing everything, while prepare best for all different cases.
I have a bit of a different perspective. I agree, it's really important when you're talking to people who are not engaged, haven't really heard about the climate crisis, to be really, really knowledgeable. But what I do is a little bit different. Is our strategy is looking at who actually believes in climate change. So in the United States, and this is specific to here, there's a lot of research that shows there's like this amount of people who are really big supporters of climate action, a huge chunk of people who know that climate change is real, but they don't know what to do about it. They don't know if they want to get engaged. And then it's actually like a small number of people who actually don't believe climate change is real. So what we've realized is for the past 30 years, our movements have failed because you walk into a room and people want to talk specifically about which emissions do what, or every little nitty gritty detail. And it kind of turns people off from being engaged in the movement. So what my advice would be, and this is based on my personal context, is that simplify it. Make the message really simple. Make it a clear, are you in or are you out? And you can kind of convince people, because knowing that most people already believe in the basic fact that climate change is real, join you in your movement because you have a solution. With the Green New Deal, we know that the solution exists. All we have to do is band together and get it passed. So kind of simplifying it and just creating a direct action where people can just easily get engaged and involved is kind of where our strategy is pivoting a little bit.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing, Sarah. Xiang, you have anything?
Yeah. Okay, so I have to say that I started off agreeing with Chiagozie about how knowledge is really important, because I think when I first started, I thought okay, I have to know everything and convince everyone about this thing. But recently I have realized that maybe that might not be the case. If you are able to make them feel strongly about something, rather than for them to just rationally know every single fact about climate change, that might work to get them inspired to do something as well. Yeah. So I think for something that I kind of noticed was that not a lot, but some people who have stepped up to say, okay, I'm going to do something about climate change. Sometimes they are people with children, and they say, I don't know anything about climate change, but what I do know is the future for my children won't look so good. So they don't actually know anything, right? They just know that if they don't do something now, their children will suffer in the future, and that's a feeling that makes them want to do something. Yeah. So I would say if you can somehow make people feel something rather than just giving them the knowledge, I think that could really inspire them to change. Yeah. And also because for my own volunteers, I think a lot of them come in not really knowing a lot of things, right? They just somehow have the passion for climate or environmental issues. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing, Xiang. Unfortunately, we have a lot of questions. Thank you very much. But unfortunately, we don't have that much time to cover all of the questions. Thank you everyone for joining us here today. I'm actually handing this back to Marilyn from CDL.
Hi everyone. Thank you everyone for joining our 8th virtual SSA once again. A special thank you to Cheryl and our panelists, Chiagozie, Sarah, Xiang, and Marie-Claire, for this robust conversation. We'd like to take a quick screen grab of everyone on the screen before everyone leaves. So please turn on your camera and strike a fun pose or just smile, and someone from our team will count down from 3.
Okay. Can everybody take time to tidy your hair. Looks good. Time to turn off.
Okay, I guess I'll count down. 3, 2, 1. Okay. Thanks, everyone. As mentioned before, this session has been recorded and will be posted on the CDL Sustainability YouTube page for your viewing. And please do join us in the next virtual SSA session on Youth4Climate Global Conversations with Young Champions, Zero Waste Heroes on 8th July, 7:30 p.m. And look out for the details on our social media platforms. Thank you again, and stay safe, everybody.
Thank
you.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Thanks.